Good morning, everyone. My name is Stuart Richner, CEO of Richner Communications and publisher of Herald Community Newspapers. Welcome to the Herald Inside LI Not-for-Profit Summit, where we will be examining how communities, not-for-profit organizations have once again provided a lifeline to so many of our neighbors during the COVID-19 pandemic, and how these invaluable organizations are facing novel challenges in the new economic environment. To explore these topics, we are honored to be joined by Rhonda Klch, Neela, Lockel, Paule Pachter, Andrea Rieger, and Jennifer Smith. Our keynote remarks will be delivered by Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds. Thank you all for being here today, and an additional thank you to our summit's sponsors, Grassi Advisors and Accountants, Investors Bank, and Marketing Works, for supporting Herald Inside LI and our Long Island communities. I am looking forward to a lively discussion, and will now turn it over to Herald Inside LI host, Skye Ostreicher, and Grassi Advisors and Accountants partner and not-for-profit practice leader, David Rottkamp, who will be moderating today's event. Thank you all, and Skye, it's yours.
Thank you, Stuart. Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Herald Inside LI. I'm your host, Skye. Herald Community Newspaper Group launched this webinar series in August as a new way to engage with and expand our audience while people, for the most part, are still stuck at home. As we have all learned, the pandemic has impacted our lives in a variety of different ways, including how we do our jobs and interact with one another. Throughout the course of our 10 episodes so far, this series, Herald Inside LI, seeks out panelists with answers to some of the major questions on the minds of everyone today. What is the impact of the booming residential real estate market in the suburbs with so many families fleeing the city? How are government officials pivoting from their agendas to affect change in our new normal? And how can parents play a role in helping kids cope with mental health issues related to the lack of in-person socialization? Next Thursday, on an episode focused on applying to college, we'll discuss how students can still shine on a college application when standardized testing is optional and extracurricular activities have been canceled. Like all of our shows, this show is being recorded, and you can find all the episodes as well as registration for future shows on our website, liherald.com/insideli. And if you have any suggestions for a future topic or know someone you'd like to see on this show, please email me at insideli@liherald.com. And I'd like to take a moment also to thank our sponsors, Grassi Advisors and Accountants, Investors Bank, and Marketing Works. We appreciate your generosity and dedication to bettering our community. You may be tuning in today because you realize some of the obvious challenges the pandemic has created for not-for-profit organizations. So today we'll explore some of the creative solutions when it comes to fundraising and staying engaging when most of our norms have been disrupted. Today is a special episode for 3 reasons. 1, we have an hour and a half together as opposed to the usual hour. 2, I have a co-moderator with me on the panel who's also an expert in his industry. And 3, we have a keynote speaker. So now that I've set the tone, I'll turn the spotlight over to Dr. Jeff Reynolds, President and CEO of the Family and Children's Association, our keynote speaker, to set the mood. Jeff, Dr. Reynolds.
Thanks, Skye, and a huge thanks to the Herald. You know, I think the webinar series that you guys are doing really highlights the value of the Herald in our community and kind of brings us back to those roots beyond a community newspaper. You guys are doing so much to keep everybody informed, and we really appreciate it, especially in the not-for-profit community where we want to let people know about the services we provide. And you've got some great panelists here this morning, including several folks who I call friends. We should have a very lively discussion. None of them are shy. And so I think this will be a great conversation. You know, in setting the tone, you know, we have this conversation at a time when we're looking at what some are calling a second or a third wave of COVID. And one of the things we know very clearly is for those of us on the front lines in dealing with health and human services and disaster relief, we've come to understand that COVID has exposed all of those fault lines that existed long before the pandemic ever hit. When we think about Hunger on Long Island, it's something that has always been there, somewhat hidden, but has been exacerbated by COVID. When we think about housing accessibility, certainly that's been an issue, and we've come to understand very clearly that there's a public health impact when folks are crammed into very cramped living environments, sometimes with several generations. We've come to understand the crisis in childcare, and we see that not only as a service provider, but as an employer. At FCA, we employ more than 200 women, many of them single moms with kids. And we've all been on Zoom calls where moms are balancing a 2 and a 3-year-old in either hand, while at the same time trying to have an important conversation about agency operations or programs for other people. We've also seen very clearly the health inequities, that when you look at where COVID has hit the hardest on Long Island, where there have been fatalities, geographically, we know that places like Hempstead, Freeport, Uniondale, Roosevelt have been hit particularly hard. We know that certain populations have been hit particularly hard, including our senior population. And while Washington and Albany quibble about whose fault it is, we know that thousands of seniors have been allowed to die in skilled nursing facilities, sometimes with families completely estranged and looking inside through a window or on FaceTime to watch that person take their last breath. We know that when it comes to mental health issues, the anxiety and depression among our kids, among adults, among probably all of us, is higher than it's ever been before. And that comes from the huge uncertainty that lies ahead. It comes from the personal vulnerability. It comes from the financial insecurity. It comes with all of those things that come along with a crisis. We also know that the other pandemic we used to talk about a lot, the opioid crisis, has all but vanished from the headlines, yet we know that opioid overdoses are up to levels that we haven't seen since 2016. It's a problem that we were turning a corner on. We're right back to where we started many, many years ago, where we will experience more deaths this year than we have in the past couple of years combined. So we have a lot of work to do. And at the same time, we've seen some pretty significant fault lines in service delivery. We know that not-for-profits, including some of those, maybe all of those that are part of this webinar, were already stretched to capacity. So when we talk about the way forward and potentially tightening our belts and doing more with less, that happened 12 years ago. We were already stretched to capacity. The demand here on Long Island was already beyond what we were able to provide. We know that most not-for-profits are chronically underfunded by government. Case in point, we run Nassau County's only shelter for runaway and homeless youth. Funding hasn't changed in 30 years. Guess what's happened to our labor costs, our utility costs, virtually everything. Yet we go out there and fundraise dollars to keep that program going, as all nonprofits are. So that chronic underfunding, it's a lousy business model, and we've all known that. But we go out and we hold golf outings and we hold dinners and we do direct appeals to try to backfill some of those funds, just to keep things going, not to expand, not to be entrepreneurial, not to meet emerging needs, just to do what we've done before and keep our heads above water. Well, guess what? Many of those golf outings, all of those dinners, all of those fundraising events disappeared as of March. And as health and human service organizations, we can't hold them and just say, pretend there's not a crisis going on. The optics on it are really bad. And quite frankly, there's a responsibility that we all have. And so we've all shifted to these virtual environments, I think with varying levels of success. But the reality is, for many not-for-profits, not for all, but for many of us, an already dire situation has become worse. And the perfect storm here really is increased needs, people banging on our doors who maybe used to be donors, who are now seeking services. People who used to donate food now getting on food lines to get it for themselves. People who were equipped to deal with multiple generations in their own home, or their aging parents now turning to organizations like ours and the other ones that are part of this webinar for help. So those donors have now become consumers of services. We also know that government, facing a fiscal crisis on all levels, absent a federal aid package, has begun withholding, and I put the term in quotes, 20% from every state contract. County governments have done the same. County governments are looking at sales tax revenues plummeting. And so fewer donations, government cuts, makes for a really difficult situation. Having said that, I think one of the common themes you're going to hear today is that not-for-profits are used to dealing with adversity. We help folks deal with adversity. We help folks through adversity. We're all buckling down to do that. We're all using every tool in our toolbox to get through 2020 and head towards brighter days in 2021, even if we don't know what that brings. But I think some of the innovation you'll hear today, whether it be telehealth, when it comes to the provision of mental health services and addiction services, to the creative ways we are raising money, I think what you're going to hear today is some hope, an unbridled hope for the future, organizations that are looking for ways to emerge out of this stronger, and quite frankly, a way for Long Island to come together in 2021 in a way that we never have before. And so with that, I hand it back to David to lead a really expert and a really qualified panel to talk about all the great work they're doing and prospects for 2021.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds, and thank you everyone. And in case you are just joining this, welcome to Herald Inside LI. And hi, Paul, I see you just joined our panel too. And before I introduce my co-moderator, I do want to introduce the whole panel here today. And thank you again, everyone, for taking your time. These are experts in the non-for-profit industry who join us this morning to really give us an update on what they're doing, like Dr. Reynolds said, to be creative during this challenging time. We have Rhonda Klch, the Executive Director of the Equity First Foundation. Neela Lockel, the CEO of American Red Cross of Long Island. Paule Pachter, the CEO of Long Island Cares, Harry Chapin Food Bank. Andrea Rieger, CFO of the Variety Child Learning Center. And Jennifer Smith, Community Development Officer at Investors Bank. Thank you, each of you, for joining us. My co-moderator today is David Rottkamp, partner and non-for-profit practice leader at Grassi Advisors and Accountants. He will kick off our discussion today, and I may even ask him a question or two when it comes to the financial side of things. David, thanks for joining us. And as always, our audience today has submitted questions in advance, which David and I will incorporate into the conversation. And if there are any additional questions you think of, our audience, you can please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to chat it in, and we'll try and incorporate everyone's questions into the conversation and get to solving all your answers. Last but not least, now that we're all here on the screen, please smile, and I'm going to take a screenshot, and this picture will accompany an article that's going to come out in the Herald Community newspapers next week. So please smile. Yay. Thank you, everyone. Okay, I'm done. David, passing you the microphone.
Thank you, Sky. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our distinguished panel for taking time out of their busy days and schedules to be with us and to be with the Long Island community to talk about the disruption that COVID-19 has put forth on their organizations and what innovation and what strategies they're using to move forward their business operations, their philanthropy, their board development and governance structure, as well as their working and taking care of their employees, their health and safety of everyone who's doing such great work in the nonprofit community. Thank you to the Herald and to you, Sky, and to Stuart for putting forth this session today. And Grassi Advisors and Accountants is pleased to be a sponsor of today's panel. I'm a 34-year nonprofit veteran. I've never been on the front lines of providing services to the nonprofit sector, but I've been a CPA and an advisor to the nonprofit community over those entire 3+ decades. It's amazing the amount of resiliency and innovation and effort that is put forth by every nonprofit organization, from the smallest little PTA or Little League club to the largest social service, hospital and health and educational system, and everything in between. As Jeff mentioned, we come through challenges all the time in this sector. We're always faced with something, and we come through it. We become stronger. We're always focused on our mission and our vision, and we're there to take care of the folks that we're there for as part of our nonprofit organization. Grassi is thrilled to be part of the nonprofit sector and to be a Long Island, New York City-based CPA firm working with so many and hundreds of nonprofit organizations throughout the metropolitan New York area. With that, I'm going to just ask everyone to take 60 seconds, a brief 60-second intro. Introduce yourself. We know who you are and your title, but tell us about your organization. I know it's hard with everyone on this call. Everyone likes to speak. We got a great panel today. And talk about one thing that you have identified that you didn't know about your organization as you've come through the last 7 months, and that really surprised you as in your role in your organization. And now, since I don't have a panel to say, let's start from the left and go to the right, and everyone's Hollywood Squares is a little bit different. I can't say center square is so-and-so. So I'm gonna have to just call a name out and start. So Jennifer, let's start with you first.
Hi, thank you so much, David. And thank you, Sky. And I have to give a shout out to Amy Amato at the Herald as well, who I've worked with for many years in my role as Community Development Officer at Investors Bank. We are a commercial bank serving New Jersey, New York City, and Long Island. Our Long Island team is very involved in community work in Long Island. And my role as Community Development Officer is to support our efforts in community building, supporting not-for-profits, facilitating grants through the Investors Foundation, developing volunteering. So I'm really happy to be here today participating in this panel, kind of talking about how my perspective as an attendee of virtual events and an advisor of not-for-profits. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. Neela, how about you?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you also, David, Sky, Stuart, and thanks everybody for joining this morning. My name is Neela Lockel. I'm the CEO of the American Red Cross on Long Island. And so we are an organization that many of you know from the perspective of disaster response, but we have 4 other lines of service: our international services, service to the armed forces, our biomedical, where we do blood collection and have been very involved in collecting convalescent plasma. And then also our training services. So all of you who have lifeguarding certifications and CPR certifications are probably Red Cross certified. It's been an interesting time for us as an organization. We are one Red Cross across the country, and we've really had to shift, and I'm really excited to talk about some of those changes and the direction that we're all headed in. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Neela. Jeff, how about yourself?
Sure. So FCA has been around for 135 years. We're one of Long Island's oldest and largest not-for-profits. Everything from a nursery co-op in the heart of the village of Hempstead to senior programs. Lately been focused heavily on 2 major issues. One is the opioid crisis, and we have 2 treatment centers on Long Island, as well as 2 fairly new recovery centers. And then we have a street team of credible messengers that does violence, gun prevention work in the heart of Hempstead. The one thing you asked about, the one thing that has surprised me in COVID, and I would say that it hasn't surprised me, but it's reinforced for me, and that's the tireless commitment on the part of our staff, that even as they balance their own challenges, our staff has been at this 110%. I always knew that our staff stepped up when times got tough, and they have just every single day inspired me to push harder, to work harder, to do more. And you know, they're working through this pandemic in a way that has done me proud, our board proud, and certainly the community right.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. Rhonda, your turn.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Rhonda Klch. I am the Executive Director and founder of the Equity First Foundation. Unlike everybody else on this panel, we are a very small grassroots organization, and we actually only founded the organization a little over 5 years ago. So we provide financial literacy education to all stages, ages, and abilities. And we've had to go through a major restructure because a good portion of what we were doing for the community actually rested in the schools. And now that the schools are operating on these hybrid programs, we are actually not part of, even though we were written into the grant, we are no longer a first line of defense for us to kind of come in and offer our services. So we've spearheaded a few different projects. So we now started a new radio show with LI News Radio called The Diversity Project. And I know Jeff was on as a guest onto that show. And we've been taking a lot of time doing any type of online virtual one-on-ones. Since we focus in the area of financial literacy, our main mission is to make sure that we're providing opportunities and resources for people that have questions about budget, money management, what to do with my mortgage, how do I handle my credit card debt, how to make sure that they're protected and they're making the right choices, because everything about finance, as you would know, David, is emotional. So when people are forced into these financial predicaments, they're contacting us sometimes, if nothing else, other than to speak to somebody from a consulting perspective so that they can get advice on what to do.
All right, thank you very much, Rhonda. And it's words so true. Emotions come into significance when it's always about finances. Andrea, you're up next.
Myself. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much, the Herald and David, for hosting us, and thank you for everyone attending. I'm CFO of Variety Child Learning Center. We've been around for over 50 years. We're a program that services young children with disabilities. We have a school in Syosset and in Levittown, and we service many children offsite as well throughout Long Island and even a little bit into Queens. I would say that I think that I will echo what Jeff said. I think that the biggest thing that has come out of this is the resiliency of our staff and the board during this process. We service hundreds of children in both schools, and we have about 440 staff throughout all our programs. So staff are coming in with lots of personal issues as well. They're trying to, many have children at home, and they're trying to balance work and home and their own issues with dealing with COVID and financial issues, quite frankly, that have come up through this year. But I've always said that I've been very blessed and lucky to work with the staff that I work with. They're so committed to these children. Being a not-for-profit and a school, they're certainly not paid the same as they would be in a public school, nor do they reap the same benefits. And but the staff are exceptionally devoted to these children and the families that they service. And they've done an incredible job. When we went remote March for 6 to 8 months, they switched over, had to learn a whole new process, and really stepped up and became very creative. And people came out of the woodwork who were shy and maybe held back before, really helping each other and working together. And it was all about providing the service. Incredible. They came back to the building, everyone nervous, but they've been a great, incredible group of people to work with. And I'm very proud to be here with them and very proud to have the board that we have. They've been incredibly supportive throughout this whole ordeal. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Paul? You're on mute, Paul. You take us off of mute and you can jump right in.
All right, is it better now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me. This is my second opportunity, I guess, to be interviewed by Sky. The first time was very nice. I am the CEO of Long Island Cares, the Harry Chapin Food Bank. Some of you may know that we've been in existence now for 40 years. This is actually our 40th anniversary. I wasn't expecting to celebrate the milestone in the middle of a pandemic, but needless to say, here's where we are. Many of you probably know we provide emergency food assistance right now to about 375 local community organizations, primarily the food pantries and the soup kitchens. And in addition to that, we operate 6 of our own pantries at 6 satellite locations throughout the island. They're located in Freeport, 2 in Lindenhurst, 1 in Huntington. There's another one in Hampton Bays. And our newest location is our super pantry in Bethpage. So what we've been doing for the past 8-9 months is simply trying to help people survive. What we're looking at on Long Island right now, from our perspective, is we are bringing in about 78% more food than we brought in last year. We're also distributing about 78% more food to the agencies. At the height of the pandemic, when we started our COVID-19 response, we had 74 of our member agencies closed because of the virus, because people were frightened and weren't sure that they wanted to go to work. We are essential services, so are the pantries. But today, thankfully, we only have 13 agencies that are closed. So we are operating pretty much at 100% capacity in what we're doing right now. And since March 13th, in addition to our 6 satellite locations, we're operating 18 pop-up distribution sites, most of them within the town of Hempstead, to provide emergency food for people in need. We also have moved our packing operations in order to keep our volunteers happy and active with us. So we have a packing location now in Hauppauge. I am hitting the road later today to look for a second warehouse because initially our projection, based upon everything we've heard from our colleagues at Feeding America, our other food bank colleagues across New York State, we were hopeful that we would start to wind down end of November, get back to normal by December, but now we actually extended that through June of next year. So everything we're doing now will stay in place at least through June of 2021. I think for me, the eye-opener for me in the last 8 months, excuse me, has really been if somebody told me that Long Island Cares is an organization that people knew across the country, I would say, no, they know our founder, Harry Chapin, but what would they know about us? But frankly, in the last 8 months, we have raised more money than we've probably raised in the last 2 years. We track it every single day. We know that we have donations right now coming in from 41 of the 50 states. We have a map that almost looks like the Electoral College map. We're trying to see where all the money's coming in from.
Oh, but we're not going to go into politics today, Paul. So let's not talk about that.
I'll just say the ending was just as good on our Electoral College map.
Good, that's great.
So where we're at right now, from our perspective and what I can share with the participants, we're in dangerous territory on Long Island. COVID-19 has resulted in too many people being unemployed and underemployed. And because of that, sorry about that. Because of that, we're actually seeing a 43% increase in the number of people on Long Island who are struggling with food insecurity. When we started this on March 13th, we knew that there were 259,000 of our neighbors who struggle with food insecurity every day. And today there's about 460,000 of them. So this has become a real problem for people. And everything we're hearing from people that come to our distribution sites is it's either because they lost their job, they're temporarily furloughed, and most recently, I've been fired. I was furloughed for a couple of months. Now it's all over. We're seeing too many seniors, over 4,000 of them. We're seeing too many children who need food, too many veterans. And so we've got from my perspective, we've got a crisis in the region with food insecurity. It's not that way all over the country or all over New York State. Some of my colleagues are doing okay. Things are quieted down. Unfortunately, not here on Long Island.
Well, Paul, thank you very much for your thoughts and your comments. And to everyone on the panel, you're all doing great work and amazing work to help our Long Island communities survive through the last 8 months and what will surely be more strenuous times as we move forward. Paul mentioned of interesting concepts around looking forward, what you're doing for the next 6-7 months, which is part of scenario planning. And one thing that I know I'm very involved in the community is also sitting on many boards. I sit on 5 not-for-profit boards. and the amount of board involvement I have had in the last 8 months has probably doubled, if not more, in terms of their the nonprofits looking for guidance from their board members. So I'd like to maybe start there, and then we're going to focus into philanthropy and then some workforce and sustainability matters over our next 50 minutes or so. But if we start with the board, Neela, let's start with you, and let's talk about, what is the role your board has played during the pandemic in terms of their governance responsibilities, and how have you been able to cultivate new board members, if at all, during the last 8 months?
Sure. So I am very fortunate to have an awesome, amazing board of directors who have been wholly engaged in our work always, right? And so they've really been great ambassadors for us. And during COVID, they have stepped up in so many ways. Some of the things that have been really important for me, certainly their regular duties have continued, their roles have continued. I mean, the work of the organization never stopped. We had to pivot a bit, but it's never stopped. And so they have been essential in providing guidance, information, relationships, contacts and connections to help guide some of the changes that we've had to shift into. So they have remained very heavily involved and engaged. And I have also put a tremendous amount of effort into keeping them involved and engaged. So as a result of COVID, we've had different things come up. So we've had projects and groups and really trying to get our committees to help us with some of our efforts. One of our biggest pushes has been, so we're an organization where more than 90% of our workforce is comprised of volunteers. And so we've had to look to build out our workforce, because so many of our volunteers, especially in the early days, we are retired or have conditions which made it more complicated for them to go out and do the work. And so we had a really big push on recruiting volunteers, and our board has been tremendously helpful in doing that, building partnerships, getting the word out, and really supporting us as a team. And in fact, the Long Island chapter is part of the Greater New York region. And so our 3 boards have really been, there's been some communication and cooperation and support across all 3. As far as board cultivation, it's a challenge. It's been hard. You can't deny that. Partly because we're in this wholly remote space. And so I have been fortunate that my board has been really engaged in that process as well. And so we've had a lot of conversations around recruitment, where are our priorities, and how do we engage prospective board members and involve them in the work, especially since our work today, although we're carrying out our mission as we always have, it looks different. It looks different to outsiders. And so how do you tell the stories in the same way, and how do you get people engaged and involved in the same way? And so that's been a team effort. I would say that, and this will probably dip into some of the other conversations we'll have, is that the community across the board has stepped up in such an enormous way, right? And so you would think that COVID would have people hunker down in their homes and hide away. And in fact, people have done what they needed to do. And then when they set themselves up and have, gotten their own bearings, they've reached their hands out to say, how can I help? How can we get involved? And so we've been feeling a lot of that kind of interest and support, and that's been tremendous for us. And again, I'm grateful to our board of directors for helping to field some of that and helping to support some of that engagement.
David, you're muted.
I am muted. I'm usually very good at that. Thank you. I sit on the board of the National MS Society as well as the Greater New York City chapter as well. And we've been able to recruit, interesting enough, 9 new board members this last cycle. And that could only have been done by the tremendous work of our governance committee, who really stayed focused and really stayed dedicated to the mission to bring people in to want to be part of the solution for our local chapter as well as for the National Society. Jeff, in your organization, have you been able to keep boards engaged and active, and how have you as CEO been able to communicate, or have you increased your communication to your board through the pandemic?
Yeah, David, so you know, because you and I have talked about it, we have a pretty large board at FCA, 34 board members, some going back 30 years, who are still very active on a weekly basis with the organization. You know, we've continued to operate, and in fact, it's made it easier for some folks to attend board meetings since we're doing them virtually. So folks who would otherwise have to commute from New York City and rely on traffic patterns maybe to make a meeting on time are more engaged. I've gotten more phone calls from board members than I ever had before. When you have such a large board, I think there's a diffusion of responsibility, and that unless you're on the executive committee, you assume, you know, I'm checking in with everybody else and everything is good. But this has really been an all hands on deck. We have since March added 2 new board members to our roster as part of our diversification. And so we added a woman named Sylvia Cabana, who's an immigration attorney in Garden City, to our board, as well as Calvin Lawrence from Newsday onto our board. And so we're still actively recruiting board members and doing it. As far as the communication, I find that everybody, and we commiserated about this before the webinar started, everybody is actually more pressed for time now than they ever were before, and probably working longer hours. But we found real clear, concise ways to do this. So I have a weekly call with my board chair, which we never had before. And sometimes it's 3 minutes, sometimes it's 33 minutes to talk about what's going on. But the other thing that I started doing with the board is just do what's called 5 Bullet Friday. Every Friday, they get 5 bullet points of things that are happening in the organization that they might be interested in. There's usually a hyperlink in the event that they want more information. And then, of course, an invitation to call me on the phone or shoot an email back if they require amplification of any of the things that I bulleted. But it takes me 10 minutes to write it. It takes them 5 minutes to read it. And it gives them a real high-level view as to what we're dealing with this week and what are the hot topics.
Thank you, Jeff. I think that's a great strategy. All the boards, the CEOs of all the boards I'm on, the same thing. Friday afternoon between 4 and 5, I hear from all of my CEOs of all the boards I sit on of the organizations, and with an update as to what's happened this past week, what to look forward to, upcoming events, things of that nature. And it's been a big, important piece of keeping the board engaged. Even though we're probably some are not meeting as often as we were, but the level of communication has been really strong.
Now, sorry, David, when you just said, and Jeff just said, you get all these emails on Fridays. Now I'm thinking, so for some of your organizations, maybe you should send your emails on Mondays.
It's funny. I will give kudos to my Grassi marketing team, who knows exactly when emails have to go out, when distributions for webinars go out, and communications. You really have to. We're overburdened with communication now, right. And from all cycles, whether it's government, it's donors, and just knowledge transfer. It's happening. There's so much going on. We need to really prioritize and not get so hung up on emails, and really be able to stay focused to what our mission and core is. So Rhonda, I want to talk to you because you are a grassroots organization.
Yeah, I'm very, very different than
and you have a small board. I mean, and so a smaller board, I should say. So talk to me about board engagement in your organization and what you might be doing differently at the Equity First Foundation.
Sure. So most of the people that are engaged with our organization are individuals, solopreneurs, and small entrepreneurs that really work in the financial field. So we have a lot of bankers and realtors, insurance professionals, and attorneys. So what we've decided to do is take a more individualized approach and speak individually to somebody. How has this pandemic affected your business? And are you even still able to help in the same capacity that you used to? So what we've done is we've taken our advisory board. We still keep them in the loop as far as anything that we're working on. But we've had a handful of people that have really stepped to the plate and said, look, it doesn't matter how busy we are still a believer in the community and in the work that we've done. So we've all managed to pivot a little bit. So right now in the financial arena, I call this the calm before the storm. Everything's bad, but it's not going to be, I believe, as bad as it will be probably come January and February, when a lot of these relief programs are completely expired. So what we've been doing is collaborating with other not-for-profits, contacting other organizations, and seeing what we can do to help facilitate or answer questions for their staff and for maybe the people that they serve. We've been providing smaller fundraisers, again, more on the being innovative and collaborating with other types of organizations to say, you know, right now we're available. We're still a team filled with people who want to volunteer for the community, but we're trying to figure out the best way that we can service our community. So it might be through helping somebody else with one of their volunteer efforts. We're not afraid to come out. We have a handful of people that have already had COVID. So those people are saying, look, you know, I'll be very similar to Paul, you know, I'll be on the front line handing out food or collecting. And, you know, as much as we focus on the idea of financial literacy, it's still important that we service the families that we service. And that might be food collection or PPE collection. So we're going a little out of our normal mission statement because we feel that whatever we can do to support the community is effective. And then very similar to Sky, you know, we started our radio show, the Diversity Project, and we started that back in September, and that is now officially our fundraiser. So as guests come on the show, as businesses sponsor the radio show, any of the surplus from that becomes fundraiser dollars and that we could utilize to other initiatives that we're working on. So the stronger our radio show becomes, the more donors we get, the more people that, you know, are looking at the fact that we're trying to do the best we can to share the word and share a good ROI for the people that have been related to our industry. And then as far as building the board, you know, we're doing the best that we can, but again, because of the nature of we're a smaller board, we have a lot of people that are more interested in smaller projects and acting in a more committee position than an actual advisory board position. And they're helping us with, again, smaller initiatives that we're working on.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Those are great ideas for folks to follow with the board. And let me ask one more question about the board to Jen, and then we're going to transition over into philanthropy. So Jen, in your role as community development officer, you're working with many nonprofits, and I'm sure you're communicating with boards. What are you hearing in those communications, and what do you see them being in terms of a strategic position of getting their organizations through the pandemic?
I sit on a board myself, as well as two advisory boards, one in Brooklyn, one in Manhattan, and I just recently joined the advisory board of the Community Development Corporation of Long Island. And I think I haven't really gotten up to speed on that third board, but I think in general, what everyone has been saying, just constant communication and allowing for participation. Like, for example, on the YWCA Brooklyn board that I sit in, I was able to participate in a mentoring Zoom where I was able to bring in a friend of mine who is in the medical field to help mentor the students in the program virtually. So I think that the virtual world has opened up avenues for board engagement that might not have been as feasible before, because we have opportunities to engage the board in a virtual way, as well as the day-to-day operations of the organization. So I think thinking programmatically kind of complements the fundraising needs of bringing in board members to help.
I would agree with that, Jen. We're seeing a lot of boards, a lot of CEOs and C-suites and nonprofits be very innovative with their board members and find different ways to get those members to be engaged outside of the monthly or quarterly meeting, having them involved maybe now in donor relationship calls, cultivation of relationships, mentoring, and other programmatic opportunities where they might not otherwise have been engaged. To further the mission and further the vision of the organization. I'd like to pivot over into philanthropy, and I'm going to start with Andrea and then go to Paul next. As both of your organizations do fundraising, you know, we've heard from Paul talk a lot about it, his already. With Andrea, I know you have a couple of events you have every single year at Variety, and certainly the world has gone to a virtual environment. So talk to us about some of the strategies that Variety has been doing to move their events to virtual. How far out are you thinking, and how successful have you been in some of the events you've been doing or trying to do over the last 8 months, if any?
So first, I want to go backwards a little bit. We were supposed to have our major event in April, which of course was postponed. And as we've been contacting those supporters of that event and our sponsors, really everyone has said, keep the money. Keep the money, use the money, and you have another event. We'll talk about the next event as another sponsorship. So we're finding that for the most part, everyone's been very generous and very helpful through this pandemic. We are in the process right now of developing. We haven't had any virtual events to date, but we are in the process of planning some starting in the winter. Actually planning some events, some small events that would go through each month, and then one major event. But we've been very lucky, as I said, that people have really stepped up and been very generous. And in terms of our fundraising, where we had grants that were specified for certain programs that were not able to run this past year, they've given us, use the money. If you need the money for staff, or you need the money for PPE, use the money. The foundations have come back and said, we've approached a few of them. They've come back in a couple of days and said, we're giving you carte blanche this year and we'll give you money next year. So we're finding that there are a lot of very generous people out there that have been very helpful, and happy to say that. And the events are coming. So
that's great.
Coming in the next couple of months.
That's wonderful. Planning for those events, in some ways, even 6 to 9 months out. While it's difficult to do that, we're finding in our nonprofit clients the need to really be strategic and provide enough time for your development department to pivot away from what you might want to do as an in-person event next April, May, or June. And if you don't think you can do it, maybe now's the time to make the call, change it to a virtual remote event, and then drive different strategies to find different ways to connect folks in. Scott?
We've actually changed our April event to 2022.
There you go.
Knowing that nobody is going to be ready in 2021. So
that's right.
So I'd like to know if anyone has had a virtual event. I know you're planning one, you just said, Andrea, and I know Paul is in a unique position where he says he fundraised so much during this time. And actually, when I did interview him on my show, Life Before the Virus, he told me that he hired a ton of people during the pandemic, which is a unique thing. So and Rhonda has a radio show that she made into a fundraiser. Neela, has your organization had a virtual fundraiser, and what was it like? What made it cool? Was it successful?
Sure. So I will start by saying that our in-person event is always so much fun. And I know some people here know that. And so it was a very, very sad decision for us. It wasn't really our decision. It was the environment, right? We had to cancel it. And we did pivot to a virtual event, and we did it with about 4 weeks. And it was challenging, but similar to what Andrea just said, our sponsors and our donors were wonderful, totally involved, engaged, invested in the process. Even as we shifted from an in-person event to a virtual, we maintained some of the same components. It was different. We still raised a good amount of money. We had already brought in dollars prior to, because we had been working on it for so long and had gotten most of our sponsorships already. And that night we were able to raise a really good amount of money, especially, it was a 45-minute event. And so now we actually, as an organization, we have determined that we're not having any in-person events. We're wholly remote. We're operating completely remotely right now. So we are not going to have any in-person events during our fiscal year, which ends in June. So our June gala has already been changed, and we're actually, we're doing some really interesting stuff. So we are partnering with Greater New York and the Metro New York chapters of the American Red Cross. And so we're going to have a regional virtual gala, which in so many ways is just fantastic for all of us, right? So all of our sponsors will get regional benefits across Greater New York and across Metro New York, as well as here on Long Island. Our honoree asks are significant because we are going to be presenting to the larger region. And it has taken a lot off of our plate in terms of planning. Our teams are working together, so we're not planning 3 separate events. We're going to have one major event. We're working with an outside organization to help us really get creative. I've been participating in all of the virtual stuff, and it's hard to keep people engaged and excited. And so we're just trying to find and pay attention to who's doing what and what will bring people in and keep them engaged, and will still carry the mission, right? Because that's our biggest, the biggest purpose of our gala. The 2 main priorities are fundraising and to tell the story of our mission. And so how do we do that in a virtual environment that's exciting and engaging and interesting, where we'll still have good participation and turnout? And so that's been hard for us to think about, but we are working on it. We've seen some really great creative ideas, and so look for us in April.
Now, Neil, I think those 45, 50-minute fundraising events, which everyone has moved to, keeps folks engaged at just enough time.
Yeah.
Part of the day, you have a couple of mission moments in there. You have the fundraising thermometer. You have a great MC who can provide some fun, but also drive home the need to fundraise as well as what the organization is all about. And Jeff, have you gone virtual? And I think you have in some of your events in the last 8 months. Can you tell us a little about what's going on with you?
We have, and I would say, I love Neela's event and it's fun. But let me say this: a lot of these events are not fun, right? And so, David, there are instances, and Neela, same thing, where I've seen you guys at 3 different events on the same night. We drive across the street from Woodbury Country Club to Crest Hollow, then to The model is broken, people. Look, the reality is that events are the least efficient way to raise $1, right? If we were all honest about our expenses and we figured in the staff costs, they all lose money, right? Yet we keep doing them because we say, well, people like to come and hear 3-hour speeches. I like the 2-hour cocktail parties. They don't. They like none of that.
I do.
What they do like is the mission moment, except for Sky. Sky does.
Sky loves it. I understand.
So invite Sky.
The networking part. We need that.
The networking part is important, but we got to find a way to do this a little bit differently so that we're not tripping over each other. We're not locking people into hotel ballrooms for 3 hours. We've managed to pivot, and I will say it's been a little bit more challenging. And I think the key is making sure that you can still hit those mission moments, being respectful of people's time, and helping them understand where the dollars are going. So when I say to some of our folks, and we do our fall harvest celebration every year at about this time, we had our honoree locked in. It's Mike Dowling. I've made sure that Mike is locked in for next year around this time. And it broke my heart to pull the plug on the event. But I went back to all of our sponsors, to all of the folks who come to that event and said, look, we can't have it, right? So the optics are bad. The public health implications are bad. We can't do this. And by the way, did you really need our hors d'oeuvres anyway? I'm going to take the money we would have spent on hors d'oeuvres and fancy desserts, and we're going to put them to services for people in the community. Your $1 actually goes further. You can stay home. You don't have to go rent a tux. You can stay home. And that's actually gone a long way. And when you say to people, we're not going to feed you hors d'oeuvres, we're going to provide services to folks who have needs in the community, I think that goes a long way. But this is an opportunity, along with kind of my opening comments, for us to rethink the way we raise money and to rethink the way we compete with each other and to rethink the asks we're making of people. I think, Long Island are generous, and they're coming out now in a way that they haven't before, particularly those who are feeling some financial strain. But this is our opportunity to think twice about how we raise $1 and what goes into that and what the messages look like.
Yeah, some of these events are pre-recorded. I've seen virtual fundraisers and galas that are pre-recorded. And is that something that you've had experience doing, or how can you do it live and fundraise and make it fun?
So I think fun is relative, right? And so in this environment, I think that the things that we've been talking about as far as planning our virtual event have been, how do we make sure people will stick it out? What is going to bring people in, but what is really going to bring people into the mission, right? Because for the most part, the people who are coming just for fun are probably not going to log in to the virtual event, but the people who will log into the virtual event care about the mission. So how do we make that interesting and engaging and fun and efficient, right? To your point, David, I don't want to keep people on a computer. I mean, I don't want to be on a computer for hours on end either, right? I'm on calls all day. So I want to be able to get the message out there. I want people to feel good about participating. I want them to hopefully leave feeling slightly more engaged in our work and our mission, to leave saying, oh, I didn't know that. And then hopefully plant some seeds for people to keep their ears perked or pay attention the next time we have something in the media, or the next time we're doing something, or the next time we have a volunteer opportunity for people when we are able to be back in person.
Some of the best ones I think have included consumers of services, that it's families in need who can say, so if you give $1, here's what happens to it. So full transparency, but also, it comes down to agency execs being willing to step back for a moment and let families tell the story of the organization. Yeah. They're the best storytellers we have. So being a direct recipient means that CEOs need to maybe fade into the background a little bit and give families the opportunity to tell a story, to talk about how their lives have been changed, to talk about the before and after. That requires us all getting a little bit more humble in what we do, but I think it's so important, not only in terms of raising dollars, but if we all believe in empowerment and we all believe in lifting families up, part of that is giving those families the opportunity to let their voices be heard.
It's also finding creative events for maybe those folks to become a part of. One of the things that that I'm part of is a runway event, a fashion show event. And Andrea, you've been to it a few times, and you've seen me model now for 4 years. And it's 10 models, folks with MS or folks who have family members with MS. And we used to do it in a ballroom. We've done it for years. So we went virtual this year. And my wife videotaped me in my backyard with my suit on, not a custom suit that I was tried on for, but one of my own clothes. And we did it. And we had 9 other models who lived with the disease, and they spoke about their story. They did the modeling. It was a fundraising event. We dispersed it over 50 minutes. So it kept people engaged for almost the whole time. And we had the thermometer and the MC, and it was a great event. I've seen so many organizations do things like that, as well as really get their volunteers engaged in DIY events, do-it-yourself events. I've seen a big uptick in that. Folks doing, poker nights, or doing virtual drinks or wine tasting or things of that nature. The creativity, the innovation has really exploded in the philanthropy area when it comes to these areas. And Jeff's spot on. I'm not sure, except for Sky, and yeah, I like networking too, but sitting in a ballroom for 3 hours is not my idea of a fun evening anymore. And the more I can participate in these types of events that are fun and engaging, and I'm learning about the organization and committed to it, I think that it works really well. I'd like to move over to the individual giving and corporate giving slide for a few moments as well, because that is an area on Long Island that we know there's a lot of wealth on Long Island, and has anyone, or can anyone talk to changes, and maybe Paul, we'll start with you, around the area of individual giving and corporate giving. Have you seen changes in that through the pandemic period, and what might you see as a challenge, if any, as you move towards the end of the year?
For one, we have seen a significant increase in corporate donations and individual giving to our organization in the past 8 months. I go back a second to the virtual fundraising. We're not doing it. We made a conscious effort not to do it because, we're seeing things out there and we're watching other groups doing it. And, I have 7 people who work in our development and fundraising department, and they talk to others. And we decided, let's take a different approach. Let's sponsor some of these virtual events that our member agencies were going to be hosting. And so it's anywhere from doing a sponsorship to the Hamptons International Film Festival, and, doing a sponsorship for one of our agencies who were doing a virtual dinner. We canceled ours for this year. We have one on the books for next year. To go back, I think maybe Jeff said this, our donors aren't clamoring for special events right now. They're very happy not putting on a suit and tie and not eating the proverbial chicken dinner. Everyone that contributed sponsorships to what would have been our 40th anniversary dinner, many have said, just keep the sponsorship. We've given them an opportunity. We can roll this into 2021. They said, no, take it for now. Do what you have to do. So corporate giving is up. Corporate outreach to us has been up. We decided early on to take the money that we would invest in our dinner, in our golf outing, and put it into advertising. And so, we filmed a series of TV commercials. Our latest one is showing right now on 8 networks. Took out more newspaper ads and things like that. We customized our direct mail pieces. We do about 7 of them a year. All of them have been tremendously successful. But in the last 8 months, we've customized it. We've done a special direct mail on what's going on with seniors on Long Island and the needs that they have. We even did a special mailer on our pet pantry, which surprisingly enough did very well. So we are doing a lot of outreach to corporations right now and talking about our work and reporting to many of our donors. Jeff mentioned earlier about communication with his board. We do have ongoing communications with our board, but we've increased our communications with our corporate donors and our large individual donors. So every month when we issue a data report, not only to Feeding America or to the governor's staff or to the health department or to both county executives, we're also issuing that same report to our donors so that they know what we're doing. They know what the numbers are. The one thing we did virtually, and I would certainly recommend it to anyone in our profession, we did a virtual press conference a couple of weeks ago. I was surprised at the turnout for this virtual press conference. Usually, you sit and you worry about, who's going to show up, and, we got to social distance them, and, you got to wait for News 12 to get here. We did it virtually, and everyone was on the screen as soon as we launched it. And it lasted 10 minutes and served us for a couple of days very well. So, yes, to go back to your initial question, the corporate community on Long Island has continued to be very generous. The corporate community across the country have really taken a serious look right now at what food banks do. There's a lot of activity right now in Albany about how to move forward with the food banks. There's discussions in Washington right now about what do we need to do with this issue of food insecurity that's through the roof, depending upon what state you're in. So we'll see what happens. But no, look, every time you're in a crisis situation, and for us, this is the third one in a matter of, the last 15 years or so. It started with Sandy, and we saw the increase in fundraising and support. Then it went into the government shutdown. We saw the same thing. And now with COVID. And the only difference between COVID and those other two events is COVID is affecting everybody. And the increase has been quite substantial.
Great, thank you, Paul. Andrea, maybe you can spend a moment from Variety's perspective, then Rhonda and Neela, your perspective as well in terms of what you're anticipating in terms of your year-end gifting to your organizations and how corporations, and I do believe they are stepping up more than they ever have before, and maybe some of your major donors as well. Andrea?
They are, and I think I mentioned as well that we had canceled our major event in April 2020. And when we contacted all our corporate sponsors, not one of them took the funding back. And not one of them said, no, use it for when you actually do the event, whenever that is. They said, keep it. Tell us what you need for this year. What are you doing this year? Submit another application. Come across this year. They're not counting it as donation. They're counting it as the year that they gave it, keep it, and go forward. So finding that there is a lot of generosity out there. And I think that this year, I believe that our fundraising in total dollars will end up being almost the same as it's been in the past. And I think, I agree with Jeff, when we do a fundraising event, it's expensive. It's expensive in the cost, it's expensive in our time and staff time. And what do you really end up netting out? I mean, we net out what looks like a nice amount, but I think that we will be able to net that out probably in a very different way this year. We also are finding that I think that generally across Long Island, people come out to help each other when times are not good. And we're very fortunate in our school that we provide services to young children, I said, with disabilities. We also have a child care program. But in addition, through a grant and through another corporation for many years, they've helped fund us to help support families in need during the year. So they give us money to help families who may not be able to come for parent meetings because they don't have any transportation. We can use the funds for that and for many other means. And so recently we sent out letters to families, the social work department, to self-identify, and people sent in checks, other families who said, I don't need the help, but please use this to help others. And we've never really seen that happen before. And that's amazing just in and of itself.
It's a great story.
I think that this year will be a very different year in how we look at fundraising, but I don't really see a negative impact overall by the end of the year. Maybe a little bit, but not to the extent that I thought it would be.
Thank you, Andrea. Rhonda, any thoughts?
Sure. So for us, fundraising is not as critical as it is to some of these other organizations because we are a volunteer board. So for us, what's just as important as the dollars is making sure that we have the industry professionals that are there to actually help facilitate the programs that we're doing. We do, however, at a holiday event for the end of the year every year, where we try to service about 500 families. And unfortunately, that's our biggest concern right now, is making sure that everybody's going to stay on board with that. Can you hear me?
Yes. No, David.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, sorry. No, you're sorry. I just.
No, I was like, I couldn't tell if you were trying
No,
to.
I got something from outside. Just was a loud bang and distracted me. My apologies.
Gotcha. So we do this holiday event. We service about 500 families a year through an initiative that we call Holiday Dreams. And what we're finding right now is, as we're reaching out to some of the corporate side, what they're saying is, we can't guarantee we could give you dollars, but we're willing to help spread the mission. What do you need? Yeah. Do you need a toy drive? Do you need a gift card drive? So as long as we know that the people are willing to come together, for us, it's about the community. It's not always about the actual physical dollars, unless we're doing something that's specific to a mission event.
Great advice. Great thoughts to share with the audience. Thank you, Rhonda. Neela, how about with American Red Cross?
Sure. So, quite frankly, in the early days of COVID, we were all really, really concerned. Our fiscal year ends June 30th, and we ended June 30th ahead of goal. And to date, we are seeing an increase in unsolicited dollars coming in. We've seen incredible generosity from our community. We've seen new donors walk in the door. And, it's interesting for us. So we are very well known as a disaster relief organization. So during periods of disaster, we often see a much larger, much more revenue coming in during disaster season, which runs, typically June 1st to November 30th, but that money usually comes in September and October. But we've been seeing dollars coming in. We've seen a lot of interest, a lot of response to any outreach as well. And so I've been really impressed and pleased. I'm hopeful that this will continue. I think that what has happened, like I said earlier, that people really needed to get their bearings and set themselves up. And for those people who found that they were able to continue generating revenue for themselves, their businesses, their families, they were able to then put money out. I've seen people I know who have taken dollars that they would have otherwise been spending on day-to-day expenses and have turned that into donations that they're making to different nonprofit organizations. So I've been so impressed and pleased and inspired by the incredible generosity of our community. And it's a sign for me that we really do, you know, we talk a lot about our neighbors helping neighbors. The Red Cross functions with that mentality because we are a volunteer organization. And we see that just really, we are living up to that slogan right now. And I'm so happy to be able to share that.
That's great. Thank you, Neela. Jeff, to you, a question around year-end appeals without appearing tone deaf to what's going on around you today, and maybe some strategies that FCA has used to find other funding, other grant opportunities, maybe foundations or other types of transactions that that they would not normally have gone through as part of their pandemic pivot.
So that's a great question. Look, as a multi-funded agency, we have multiple revenue streams that I look at, and some of that is government, and I'll go back to that. Some of that is services that we bill for, particularly in the behavioral health space, and then there's the charitable piece of that. We too have experienced a number of lapsed donors come back to us, and in some cases, we've highlighted the fact that at FCA, we've been around 135 years. This is not our first pandemic, right? And so as an organization, we lived through the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 and 1919, a couple of world wars, a Great Depression, the stock market crash, Sandy, 9/11, and now this. And so we've used that history to re-engage some donors who might have lapsed, not the ones from 100 years ago, but some more recent donors that may have fallen off to say, hey, you know what? We're still here. There's a whole lot of uncertainty in the world, but one of the things we know for sure is we're going to continue serving folks on Long Island in need. And that's gone a long way. That's meant bringing in some new donors who have said, you know, I want to invest in an organization that's been around for a while and will likely be able to come out of this in a solid kind of way. The same thing goes for foundations. We were very aggressive about securing PPP funds up front. So that we would have that cushion, we'd have that ability to continue to operate without doing major layoffs. And so we put a lot of time and attention to that, as well as kind of maximizing our reimbursement levels. It's well and good to go ask somebody for $5 for a raffle. It's another thing to take a hard look at your billing and figure out, how do I bill for telehealth services in a way that makes sense? And am I able to keep all of that going in the midst of this crisis? On the government front, and I want to say this, and I don't want to get the reputation of being the contrarian, I will say we have a habit in this field of believing that we can fund vital services that government ought to be providing by holding more golf outings and bake sales. Part of this is asking our neighbors to contribute, but part of it is holding government accountable and say, you have an obligation to make sure that people are fed. You have an obligation to make sure that people have safe housing. We'll hold another golf outing, but we need you to step up at the same time. There is no elected official out there right now who is not standing up saying we need more PPE for our communities. For a lot of our communities, food and mental health services and childcare, that's their PPE against things that are far more deadlier than COVID, like chronic poverty and chronic violence and trauma and everything else. And so part of this voice needs to be holding government accountable to do their piece, holding our donors accountable to let them know what we're doing and impress upon them the importance of supporting us, and also taking a look inside to figure out, so where are the efficiencies? Where can we maximize our reimbursement? So for me, it's not one question, it's a multi-pronged strategy that we've been doing since the beginning of time, but I think we put a finer point on it now because we've had to.
The reality is
I think a lot.
Please, Sky.
A lot of these organizations here, you sound lucky. Like I'm sitting here thinking, wow, everyone's outreaching and donating money and being generous during this challenging time for so many people. So thank you for sharing some of those stories. And I want to ask Jennifer also, because you work with a lot of different organizations, is this something you're seeing also beyond this panel?
I think that this panel is a little bit possibly skewed towards services that are receiving additional donations. I think a lot of organizations are really struggling. like arts and cultural organizations have really had to rethink how they're going to deliver programming. Some organizations have had to rebudget for additional PPE that they've had to purchase. Like, for example, group homes providing services for adults with disabilities. So I've seen new fundraisers to raise money for PPE that's not covered by Medicare reimbursement or government funding, or technology that they don't have in order to deliver remote services for education. So I think that there is definitely a lot of need that is not being met by individual donations and corporate donations.
And our
that we limited it, this conversation to what our fundraising efforts are, and if people were donating. We didn't step into the fact that it's been a time to have to look at how we're structured and reorganizing and how we're funded. We didn't talk about yet how is the funding end of it. We were just talking about are people being generous right now. So
Right.
Absolutely.
we didn't touch
No,
it.
and that's a great point, and you're looking at your organization and reimagining, because we're not going to be able to go back. You can't go back to before March 1st and be what you were. What you really need to do is think about and reimagine what you want to become and where you want to be more nimble, to be more lean. Because the concept that government likes to say is, yeah, you're going to give you less, but do more. It's need for services, need for programs, but we're going to give you less. So do more for less. Well, you can't do more. You can only do less with less. And that's the reality. You're so stretched and your workforce is so stretched that you can't do what you used to do with less dollars. And it's nice to have increased fundraising today, but then you have to also think about are people pre-giving, because it is pandemic time right now. What is the impact of that for next year and the year after, especially around appeals and things of that nature? So these are all things to be thinking about. We only have about 10 minutes left in our time, and we could spend, this is great, I love this panel. We could spend hours talking about so many different topics, but I do want to get into workforce a little bit. And this is going to be, I guess, speed round over the next 10 minutes. Just we have some questions that have come in from the audience around the workforce. And maybe each of you can just, spend brief response. And we'll try to get through some of the questions here. But one of the things is we know that everyone's workforce has been disruptive. Some folks are continuing to be in the office because they're frontline workers and they're essential businesses, and others are back in a remote environment. So how have you been able to address and take care of your employees' fears about coming back to work when they are moving out of virtual back into a remote, into an in-person environment? And what are some of the strategies you've done to help with that? Again, speed round basis. So let's start with Jeff.
So we've given staff a lot of flexibility. I've quickly understood that there are some staff that need to work on site, i.e. the folks that work in our residential programs. But there are staff that never need to come back to our offices. For example, our development staff, do they really need to be there? And the answer is no. We're in the middle of designing a brand new office kind of as we speak. And the good thing is I was able to incorporate some of those social distancing principles into that office, but also reduce my overall headcount. And I think, for our staff, we don't pay them very much. Nobody in nonprofits gets paid a lot. But I think our willingness to be flexible, to put our trust in them, and to understand that they have needs that go beyond FCA, and that if we're truly Family and Children's Association, we need to pay attention to people's family lives and those competing priorities. I think that served us well and will going forward.
Thank you, Jeff. How about
Yeah, as we go through this speed round, like you said, in the next 10 minutes, I also want to throw into the question is, what do you envision as future job opportunities within your organization also?
Yeah, Neela.
Sure. So it's interesting. We were actually embarking on a real estate process. It's been a long, lengthy process, and all of that is on hold right now. One of our biggest thoughts around planning has always been around our operating expenses. And so just tying back to what we were talking about earlier, in addition to raising more dollars, we've been looking at all of our expenses. And when we think about our workforce, the first thing that we had to do was ensure that our workforce was safe. So we went wholly remote. Like I said before, our volunteers comprise more than 90% of our workforce. So we needed to make sure that they had PPE, that they had supplies, and that they felt like they could say, I can work or I cannot work. I was amazed and inspired by how many people stepped up and said, we are ready to work. We had dozens of people deploy from Long Island to disasters in Louisiana, Texas, California, and Oregon. So we've had no lack of engagement and enthusiasm from our workforce. Our responsibility as an organization has been to ensure that everybody has appropriate PPE. As we look forward, similar to what Jeff said, we do know that a lot of people can work remote. We are fully remote right now. I do believe that this is going to guide our real estate decisions as we move forward. We are people though. The American Red Cross is all about human interaction and care and compassion for others. And so it really is around how do we continue to provide that and how do we create an environment where our workforce feels connected to each other. So there's a lot of considerations, but I will say that one of our top priorities and on top of keeping people safe has been engagement. How do we keep people involved, engaged, knowledgeable about what's going on, connected to their peers? And so really utilizing technology to its fullest extent to accomplish that.
Great. Rhonda, how about from your volunteer perspective?
We've been doing a lot of, believe it or not, for the people that feel comfortable, we've been doing some small gatherings, generally 3 or 4 of us, and we make them into little strategy sessions. And we find that it's more personal, interactive, and we get a lot more accomplished. And there's still that human element. But for the other people that are not comfortable, we've been spending time either doing conference calls, Zoom calls for the volunteers. And again, what's important is our biggest concern with a majority of the volunteers is making sure that they are available when we have families that are in need of those particular services and programs that we're providing.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Rhonda. Andrea?
So we were totally remote for 6 months, from March and through September until we opened. But remember, we're a school for young children with disabilities. So we had to open. We brought everyone back in a hybrid mode from in September, October. We brought back. Preparing the building took a lot of months, making sure that the staff were feeling comfortable. We had sessions with the staff and with families to assure them what we've done with air filters and dividers and PPE equipment, cleaning the building. We've hired extra maintenance staff. The cost of that is astronomical. We didn't get into what all of this is costing and how we're funding that. The fundraising dollars do not pay for all of this. But we've really, I think we've maintained a real safety in the building and staff feel secure. But in terms of staffing, we're constantly hiring. Staff have left for a multitude of reasons. One, because we're a school and we're competing with the public schools. Public schools hired a lot of additional staff this year when they opened up because they were, they had to separate out their classes. So in a few days before we opened, we lost a couple of staff. We're competing with them all the time. We're constantly hiring now. There are people out there to hire, but it's not. We hire anywhere from 0 to 10, 15 people a month now. We are trying to hire, and people are getting, as I think I mentioned before when we were speaking much earlier, that in the last week or two, starting to see staff getting a little more nervous. The numbers outside of us are getting higher in the surrounding area. I think in a matter of 3 days, the percentages in Nassau County went up from 2.4 to 3.4. People are watching that, staff are watching that and getting nervous now. So we'll see what holds as we go on in the next couple of weeks.
Being proactive, being in front, being
we are in front all the time.
Being transparent with your employees is the best. Is what we're finding in our CPA firm and what we're finding in our nonprofit clients, and what everyone should be doing is being transparent about the challenges you have and what you're looking to do and how you'll be pivoting based on certain thresholds and benchmarks as they move forward. Sky, we're down to 5 minutes, and since you do this on a regular basis, and I'm just here as a fill-in, I love doing it. I got to do more of this with you.
Yeah, let's have you. A question for you. From an accounting perspective, and maybe Jennifer can chime in too from the bank side of things on the financial side. What are you seeing as some of the solutions maybe that you've come up with, creative ways to help out some of these organizations?
Organizations are, I mean, we had a nice positive conversation around philanthropy, but many organizations are struggling. The government-funded organizations are struggling. The ones that are smaller grassroots that rely on events and things of that nature are struggling. Anyone funded by fee-for-service is struggling in the government. Scenario planning, budgeting, forecasting, and being proactive in terms of your financial future. You have to do that, and while your operations and your programs are going to continue to run, and you need those folks to be doing that. As a C-suite executive, you need to be looking at the bottom line as well, because you have to pay your employees. I mean, it's great to pay your vendors, but when you have to, but you got to pay your employees, and you got to make sure there's cash flow coming in, and being able to scenario plan the what if situations a month, 3 months, 6 months down the road is a vital part of that forecasting model that CEOs and CFOs really have to be doing to look at a sustainable model. The sustainability discussion was much easier a year and a half ago. It was just more about being more efficient, and trying to add more dollars to the bottom line and create some reserves. Now it's more about survival. And the challenge that we're seeing in the sector now is organizations just cannot survive. And the reality there is you have to be forward thinking as a CEO, CFO level and say, do I need to consider joining a bigger group or a peer sister or brother organization to help collaborate, help joint venture? People think merger, acquisition, collaboration is a negative word, but it's not. It doesn't have to be a negative word. It might be some ways your only chance of survival to keep your brand, your mission, and the vision of what you do in the sector, whether it's for 5 years or 135 years going forward. And as executives, I think we all have to think like that and keep that in our minds. We may not have thought like that in the past, but that's a lot of the advice that I'm giving as an advisor to my executive suites within our nonprofit clients, is to be open-minded, getting your board to be open-minded, and really think more broadly about the future of who you are and what you do, and what's the best way to continue that model, whether it's by yourself or with someone else's assistance. Jennifer, anything from the banks, from your side, working with nonprofits, and then we'll go back to.
I agree, and I would just add, I think taking a look at your board members, do you have the right people on your board to help you with the forward planning thinking? Do you have financial experts on your board? Do you have legal experts? Do you feel that your partnership with your bank, with your CPA, are they in line? Do you have a good relationship? I mean, I think what you were talking about, Jeff, with the PPP, were you able to go to your bank partner and apply for the PPP loan and have it facilitated? So I think looking forward to the next phases, making sure that your partnerships are set up and that you feel comfortable.
Great. Well, I want to take a moment to say thank you to all of you for what you do in the sector and what you do in the community here on Long Island in the nonprofit space. Your missions, how you drive, how you effectuate change is so impressive and is so needed here in the Long Island community. So thank you to all of you for what you're doing and your dedication to the sector. And Skye, I turn it back to you for final thought.
Well, thank you. I think we learned a lot, and there's still a lot of information. We could sit here and talk for a long time, but we learned that different organizations are at different places right now, and we're all adapting and pivoting to what we thought would be a temporary situation, but it's turning into our new normal, and this is the way it is. So between the virtual fundraisers and being creative and engaging with the board and putting money towards marketing instead of events perhaps, and having a radio show and getting your name out there and turning to your financial experts. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to think about this industry and every industry. So I want to thank you also. Thank you, David, and thank you, Jeff, and thank you to our panelists and to everyone who's watching. And I encourage you to please continue to tune into Herald Inside LI. And next Thursday, we're having our episode on applying to college. And again, how can you do that when every kid looks the same on paper? No one's taking the SATs, no one plays the flute, no one can go do soccer. I mean, it's difficult. So tune into that and visit our website. And I'll share my conclusion screen right now. so you can see my email address and our website. And please dial in, tune in, continue to, and if you have suggestions, please email me with suggestions if you want to see anyone in particular on the panel next time or on a different topic. So please, and thank you to the Herald and Herald Community Newspaper Group. Look out for the article next week in the paper with all of our faces here in the boxes. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Stay
Thank you.
Be well, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.